So no matter what you think about this movie, there's one thing to take away. This photograph is better than that photograph. That's my hot take of the day. The photograph stars Issa Rae as Mae Morton, whose mother, a famed photographer, unexpectedly dies and leaves a lot of loose ends to their estranged relationship. She soon finds a photograph stored away, which leads to her uncovering a lot of hidden information about her mother. Meanwhile, as she uncovers more about her mother's life, she's juggling a new romance with a star journalist played by Lakeith Stanfield. The movie was written and directed by Stella McGee. This is her fourth feature film. I'm honestly not familiar with her or any of her works, though some of her films, such as Gene of the Joneses and The Weeknd, did well with critics, as did this movie. This was released during a crowded President's Day weekend, alongside 3 other movies, most notably Sonic the Hedgehog. And what caught my attention was that it was the most positively reviewed of the bunch. But it slipped right under the radar. This got a wide release and no one was talking about it, so I wanted to know why. So that, along with the cast, drew my interest, and after having seen it, it was a nice, if far from perfect, time. So let's discuss. This movie is different than most other romance movies in the sense that it's not this conflict-driven melodrama. The movie mainly focuses on these two people who just met and their growing relationship. And it takes its time with these characters, so not only do they get to know each other better, but we get to find out more about them naturally through their conversations. So a lot of these scenes are these two characters having these nice get-to-know-you moments with one another. There's a much more subdued energy to this film, and the tone is set perfectly with this great soundtrack filled with smooth-sounding R&B and jazz tunes. And I thoroughly enjoyed them. It kept the positive energy going. And what I appreciate most about this movie is it treats the relationship exactly like it would be in real life for two people who just met each other. It's not this Romeo and Juliet style romance where they just meet and they're madly in love and they treat everything like it's the end of the world. When there's conflict, there aren't all these emotional outbursts. The conversations still feel tense, but because they're in the early stages of their relationship, there's this level of meticulousness to it still. They'll admit that they handled something wrong, but their reasoning would be because they don't know each other well enough. And even though it's a disagreement, the other respects that reasoning to a certain degree. While it's a different sort of energy, what makes these conversations so engaging is the cast. Issa Rae and Lakeith Stanfield work great together. Their chemistry was extremely on point, so the conversations flow naturally. There's a certain charisma to both of them that they can say just about anything, and it comes off as interesting. Like there's a scene where they're talking about their favorite musical artists, and had it been anyone else, it would have been a very dry conversation. But they both have this calm and collected energy, but they're still very invested in the conversation that it makes it interesting. It was really nice to watch. Lakeith Stanfield in particular has become one of my favorite new names in the business. He's had a major role in some of my favorite movies from the last few years, including Uncut Gems, Knives Out, Get Out, and my personal favorite, the overlooked Sorry to Bother You. And this is yet another impressive performance by him. Though I'd say Issa Rae is definitely the stronger of the two here, mainly because she's given more to do. She's dealing with both this romance as well as the death of her mother, so she has two different arcs going on. Though that being said, I still enjoyed both of them and look forward to seeing them more in lead roles. So the fact that there's no central conflict for the majority of this movie winds up being both a good thing and a bad thing. Because while it's a nice change of pace for a movie like this to have a nice positive energy for the majority of the movie, there's nothing story-wise that's actively keeping our interest. The movie cuts back and forth between the romance and these flashbacks of Issa Rae's mom, who's played here by Shantae Adams. And she does a great job, but the movie doesn't effectively tie this storyline into the main story well. A lot of these flashbacks are told through letters Issa Rae finds or stories she hears. And you'd think you'd see how these stories would affect her, given that they had a strained relationship and maybe this would change her perception of her. But half these scenes are never mentioned again once they're over. They're good, but they have little to no bearing on the rest of the movie. At least not until halfway through, and even then, I'd argue it only affected about 15% of the movie set in the present day, and I'm maybe being generous there. There's such a disconnect that it felt like we were cutting back and forth between two totally different movies. So when you have these flashback scenes with little to no effect on the rest of the story, as well as these pleasant, dialogue-driven scenes that have no conflict, it doesn't make for an engaging story. It isn't until the hour mark where the story picks up, because certain events cause the stakes to increase for the two lead characters. But beyond that, the movie is pretty much held together by the two main performances. There's nothing driving this movie forward other than the chemistry of these two lead actors. And they're both legitimately enjoyable to watch. But for some, that might not be enough. If someone were to tell me this was a little boring, I wouldn't blame them. This was a mixed bag for me. On one hand, you have two great performances from Issa and Lakeith Stanfield, and they really hold this movie together. Their conversations were a lot of fun, the tone was laid back, and their positive energy was a nice change of pace from your typical romance movie. However, it lacks a concrete narrative, and its pacing is poor due to never fully tying together its two main stories. For some, there's enough that this could be enjoyable, but for others, all this combined can be a major turnoff. For me, I'm somewhere in the between. The Photograph gets a 6 out of 10. It's a mild recommendation. The positives ultimately outweigh the negatives, but it's not a priority to see. If you do, just wait till Netflix or something. But let me know, did you see The Photograph, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you enjoy the performances, and were they enough to hold this movie together for you? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, if you like what you see, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you next time.